We're now going to talk about the third of the four business government society models. This one is known as the countervailing forces model. So the countervailing forces model, I like to think of it as kind of like a story of a tug-of-war. Okay? You've got different groups of people pulling and pushing back on each other, and so while it might seem that at a given moment in time, one group has dominance, at a different moment in time, there's kind of a pull back, and those groups no longer have dominance over whoever they were dominating before. Okay? So it's kind of like a continual series of tensions. Okay? Now the question is, tensions between whom? Okay. Which groups? Well, you first look at environmental capitalists. Okay, who would be some examples of environmental catalysts? Well, some of it might be things like, of course, the environment itself, as in nature, but it can also be things like the external environment. Think of markets, like the socio-political environment, so political systems, as we saw in the market capitalism model. Think of ideologies and movements. Again, that's part of the socio-political environment, as we talked about during the market capitalism model. Think of technology that's changing. Okay, that also sets kind of new background rules for the game. War, terrorism, information technology, media. These are all examples of the environment. Okay. Then you've got, of course, the public. Who is this public? Well, the public represents everything from society. Represents cultural values, public opinion, people who vote, interest and lobbying groups. We'll talk a lot about that later. Demands of the market itself, different social classes, any sort of demographic changes. So society in a very broad sense. Okay. Then we've got, of course, business. So business, of course, are firms or profit-making activities. You've got products and services. You've got public relations between firms. You've got different kinds of campaign donations coming from lobbying groups. We'll talk about that. Executives performing public, private, and governmental service. Of course, you've also got philanthropy. Okay? But generally speaking, if you remember nothing else, businesses as the profit-making activity. That's a different kind of countervailing force. And then, of course, you've got the government. The government includes the Constitution, it includes laws and statutes, it includes governmental bodies and agencies, political parties, political leaders, members of the judiciary. Okay? And of course, they're all kind of engaged in a tug-of-war with each other. Okay? It may seem that the government is suppressing the masses, but then all of a sudden there's a revolution, there's terrorism, and somehow society takes back some of that control from the government, okay, or from businesses. It may seem that the environment is pressing us down, and then someone from a business comes up with an invention to help us conquer the environment. So at any given time, it may seem that one group is dominant, but then they kind of pull back on it, and kind of an equilibrium or a type of balance is restored. Now, this model differs from the other 4 business and government societies because it allocates an explicit role to the environment. Okay? In the market capitalism model, the role of the environment, we'll talk more about this later during this course, but the role of the environment is pretty much, well, if it's a free resource, we can take advantage of it. It's seen as a resource itself. The dominance model is somewhat muted. With the environmental forces, yeah, they set the rules of the game, but specifically how do we interact with the environment, it's somewhat muted. The stakeholder model does have some discussion of the environment, which we're going to talk about in a second, but it's more about balancing interests as opposed to being an equal player. Let's see. We'll talk about some more of the theories that go with the countervailing forces model just a little bit later in this course.